Sister Dorothy Stang, born to a loving family in Dayton, Ohio, spent 30 years trying to help poor farmers in the Amazon basin of Brazil. Her reward for this was being shot once in the stomach, once in the back, 4 times in the head, and then being left lifeless on a dirty and muddy road. Filmmakers Vincent and Christina sat down with Net at the NYU Catholic Center to talk about their desire to make a feature film about Sister Dorothy's inspiring yet tragic life.
Okay, Vincent and Christina, why don't you tell us about Sister Dorothy Stang? Who is she and why does she mean so much to you?
Sister Dorothy Stang is a woman with incredible faith. She cared for social justice and the environment, and it's something that we care very much about. And after reading about her story, and me being an American and Christina being a Brazilian, we sort of looked at this as something that we would love to sort of join in on her journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, being a Brazilian and see everything that she has done for the people there, and mostly for the people in the Amazon, is very touchy, because she's not Brazilian. Mm-hmm. She became a Brazilian after, and she was able to help so much this community, and she took this case as if it was her own and made these people her family and fought for them. So I feel that's very brave of a foreigner to do that for someone else, and to fight not only for these people, but also for the forest and for everything that the Amazon forest stand for.
Deus protege todos nós com muita saúde, muita alegria. We're only going to use a part of this area, and the rest is all going to be a reserve area. And these people are going to protect this area so that no loggers or ranchers can ever make anything out of this area that would be detrimental.
Aí sempre tem de ter uma pessoa que pega modo para ensinar para os outros. Tem a semente, né?
Why don't you tell us the story? I mean, some people may not know the story. How did she get there? Why was she there? And why was she killed?
Okay, so Sister Dorothy, she's originally from Dayton, Ohio. Mm-hmm. She joined the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur when she was 16 years old, right. Which is, to me, that's admirable in itself. Her first mission work was in Arizona, and she was building a parish in Arizona, and she was working with the poor farmers, the Mexican farmers, and she was heavily influenced by Cesar Chavez.
All of the farm workers on strike here in Delano are appalled at the shooting of Marcelino Barajas and Paul Salgado. We've known now for over 10 years that the strike breakers and the growers are armed. We communicated this to Sheriff Wiley. There's been now, this is the 8th incident where we have had shootings at us. Last week, 5 days ago, another striker was wounded.
And her best friend, Joan Krim, they prayed that they would go on mission together since they were 16. They both joined together.
Right.
And it just so happens after that, Sister Dorothy went to Arizona, Joan was doing her own work, and it just so happens that they both got the call at the same time to go to Brazil. And when she first arrived, there was no parish, there were no schools, right. It was virgin rainforest. So, basically there was a campaign, it was called No Man's Land for People with No Land. Right. And they were sending in these poor people to clear the way, and then they were promised tracts of land because they were the ones that were first settled there.
Yeah. Just like the Old West, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So when Sister Dorothy got there, those were the people that she was working with. These poor farmers, most of them illiterate. Their children had no schools to go to. They were sent to work in the fields. And she started building the base communities. And these loggers were coming in with fake documents saying, you don't own this land, we own this land.
De acordo com a freira, o projeto implantado pelo INCRA era para atender 600 famílias em Anapu, mas por causa da grilagem de terras, apenas 220 famílias foram beneficiadas.
Quando o povo tem acesso a uma terra, a grilagem já está na frente. E essa é a nossa luta neste momento, para que INCRA facilita com mais rapidez para que ela tenha condição de chegar a ser uma realidade.
As the years went by and the forest was being cut down, she just kept getting pushed deeper and deeper into the forest. And that's why she eventually ended up in Anapu, which is 16 hours into the interior.
So the loggers really were winning the battle just to keep pushing them out.
This is why we're talking about this now and why it's such an important fight is when we visited Sister Dorothy's the site where she was killed. It's a community center she built called Boa Esperança,
Which means
Good Hope.
good hope.
There's a plaque that was built, in her memory. And the night that we were staying there, we had noticed that they shot the plaque 6 times, and it's sort of a threat to say, we still want this land, So she created, not only did she create the school, she built 23 schools there. She built St. Lucy's Parish, which is in Anapu. She also built forest reserves, and she called it PDS, which is Project of Sustainable Development.
Desde que foi implantado pelo INCRA o programa PDS, Projeto de Desenvolvimento Sustentável, o município de Anapu está vivendo momentos de muita tensão.
Quem vem aqui para amansar essa região?
Nossa situação aqui no Pará é muito precária. A oposição é tão forte, porque o desejo de controlar toda essa natureza é muito grande. Então, essa tensão que nós estamos passando é muito difícil. E para mim é difícil porque eles tentam até acusar nós de estar provocando esta.
We take it for granted here in the States. We have a federal park, a federal reserve spot. We have park rangers. We have people that protect those. People who take pride in those lands. The people who are living there, they don't have really any defense. There's no park rangers. There's no government support, no help. So when the loggers come in and threaten them, who's going to stand up for them? And the only person was Sister Dorothy, and Sister Jane Dwyer and Sister Katie Webster and all the people of her parish. And ultimately it led to a land dispute for that one place, which was called the Good Hope. And they martyred her, they killed her.
There was a lot of tension in that area. You had poor farmers who had a small little piece of land, and you have these big loggers, these big farmers who want to cut the forest and put cattle. So she was, like I said, she was the voice of the people. And of course, I hate to say this because this is my country, but there's a lot of
corruption.
A lot of
Because
corruption.
it's easy for them to pay off. So they come with this fake document. It was actually called cricketing. They would put the document in a box and have crickets defecate on the paper to make it look old. So any official that would say, oh, maybe that isn't your land, maybe that isn't real, well, here's an envelope full of money, and now that land is mine.
Let's just talk about, you say they were martyred, but let's tell us the story about actually who killed her and where that came from.
This gentleman named Bida and Regivaldo. So these two guys came together and basically hired gunmen.
Raifran, qual o motivo que somente hoje, neste julgamento, você não quis mais ser assessorado pelos advogados?
Eles queriam que eu assumisse e livrasse os outros lá e ficasse eu na cadeia com toda a culpa, que tudo pela minha causa. Eu falei para eles que não vou fazer isso, que ia falar a verdade, que não vinha aqui para mentir. Ele falou, não, tu tem que ir, que tu trabalha para mim. E aí ele falou, tá aqui o revólver, tu vai. Aonde tu topar com ela, tu mata ela. Isso daí eu não queria nem pro maior inimigo meu, quanto mais para ela.
Depois de 50 mil, 10 mil, 500 reais, quanto efetivamente eles deram para cada um?
O Bida deu 50 reais pro Tato e o Tato passou os 50 reais para mim.
Então quer dizer que, na verdade, a vida de Dorothy saiu por 50 reais.
e encontraram a Dorothy. Quando encontrou a Dorothy, reacendeu o negócio do planejamento. Tu tens coragem de matar esta velha? E ele diz, se a senhora não resolveu nada até agora, a senhora não vai resolver nada. E dá um tiro. Ela caiu, ele se aproximou e descarregou todo o revólver.
The thing is, still now, when the whole court process and everything, it's a big denial.
Right.
But everybody knows who demand her to be killed.
Right.
They want to blame the smaller people, like I said, the people on the community, but everybody knows who were
The gunman himself, while he was in jail, he had originally admitted everything to the authorities. And then he was attacked in jail, and he was beaten severely, and then after that, he decided not to testify, and decided not to say exactly, he didn't hold up to...
Change his story.
Exactly, he changed his story.
Perguntar eu se eu ia no julgamento, se eu tinha sido convidado. Eu falei, eu não sei. Aí ele falou que se você for, que era para mim ficar em silêncio, não era para mim falar nada. Aí eu tô na mão deles.
Do you think that was a big part of it? You know, it was a kind of a small story, and they were willing to plead guilty then, but when it started getting much more local and international press, they knew that they were going to do a lot more time, and that's why they decided to change their plea.
I think the international pressure is definitely important and was important to, you know, getting a conviction. Like I said, the convictions for her murder were the only convictions of a land dispute in the Amazon.
A long time, yeah.
And I think that has large in part to do with David Stang, her brother. Her brother came from Colorado and traveled to Beleng and to Anapu and went to every part of the trial and really tried they tried their hardest to find justice for his sister.
And to bring press, right?
And, to garner attention so that the world can look at the situation and we can shed a light on it. Because these farmers thought that they were going to hide in the shadows. Oh, we're in this little remote place. No one's going to know. So
that's what's happened before.
That's how they sold it. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But it wasn't with a nun or an American nun at that.
So exactly.
Yeah. Now there was a really well done documentary on that. Who Killed Dorothy? Sister Dorothy. Did you see that before going into the rainforest?
We didn't see it before we went. We were knowledgeable about it. We knew about it, and the first time that we watched it was on the pilgrimage.
Oh, they showed it?
Yeah, Sister Katie Webster actually set up a sheet that she tied between two trees. And they had a projector that they ran from a generator, and then they projected that in the forest. And it was funny because you have moths and all these things flying up on the sheet. But to me, that was the greatest screening, one of the greatest screenings I've ever been to.
Right.
Sitting on the floor, you have ants, fire ants biting at your ankles.
Wow,
but you're sitting there with all the people, and the people who are in the documentary is, oh, there I am, you know.
Yeah, they.
And it's a, it was a really special experience for us.
All right, let's backtrack a little bit. Tell us how you two met.
So Christina and I met at a screenwriting course here at NYU. We were both young and had a great desire to get into film, and NYU is the place to do it.
We started to hang out more, and then we finally became a couple. He came to Brazil, and that's when we knew it was serious.
And how did your family feel about meeting this gringo from North America?
Even though it was winter, my dad said it's a summer love, this is gonna be over soon. But we really made it work, because it's hard, a long distance relationship, and have been first time being outside America, coming over Brazil, which is, it can be a big unknown for a lot of people.
Have you learned to speak Portuguese yet?
Eu falo pouco português.
Yeah. All right, so when you went down there, tell us about the decision to go up to visit Sister Dorothy's parish and where she lived and died.
So my mother actually, when I was leaving for my trip to South America, she was the one that gave me the book. She had received
What book is that?
Martyr of the Amazon. It's written by Sister Roseanne Murphy, who's in Belmont, California. And she came to me with this book and she said, oh, you're going to Brazil. why don't you take a look at this book and read about it? This is an inspiring story about a nun. So as I'm reading this, it was so inspiring, and everything, the story itself was jumping out at me in images, and I was saying, this is a story that needs to be told. Mm-hmm. So when we went to Brazil, we sort of talked about this, is this something that we can do together? And
we thought it was because I have family in the state of Pará. Mm-hmm. This is where the city, the town of Anapu is. That's where Sister Dorothy was. Right. So on that trip that he came to Brazil, we already had a trip set to go to Belém, where I have family from. Mm-hmm. And Anapu is 16 hours away from Belém, which is the capital of the state. So everything just fell into place. It's a story that we like to tell because it's a real story about a person who did a lot of environmental and social service to this community. And we both fell in love with her. She was a simple woman, very humble, that she could be here. She could be living with her family. She could have everything that she wanted. Like, she was a nun, and she could be in a good parish that had a lot of money and mm-hmm. things like that. But instead, she decided to give up her life in America, in Ohio, and be very selfless and work in this small community. So who wouldn't fall in love with that? Who wouldn't think, this is a great person for us to talk about, to do her story?
It wasn't easy for us to get to the town of Anapu either. It was, that, like she said, a 16-hour bus ride, but it wasn't just one bus. The first charter bus we took was filled with more people than there were seats.
And we're like chickens.
Chickens that were accompanying us on the trip.
Did you make fajitas?
No, but it was so hot that we probably would be able to make it somehow.
Yeah. I actually had to sit in the back. There was a little compartment in the back of the bus mm-hmm. that the bus driver walked into the back, he slid open this compartment, and I had to crawl inside in order to stay, Wow. And then from there, we took another, like a small van.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that was on completely dirt road, it's the Trans-Amazon Highway, but there's no pavement. Yeah. And the potholes are bigger than the ones you see in New York here. Yeah. And like the floods wash away the road often, and it was raining. It was pouring rain as we were going. And then the last, stretch of the trip was, this old beat up pickup truck that we threw our stuff in the back, we jumped in the back, and the dials on the truck didn't work, and we had to negotiate on the side of the road, if he's going to take us or not. Mm. And, when we arrived to Anapu, Father Amaro, who is the parish priest, who was a priest that was inspired by Sister Dorothy and became a priest because of her work, he invited us with open arms, and we were definitely blessed to be there because during that time, we didn't plan this, but there was a pilgrimage that was about to happen. Yeah. And 200 of Sister Dorothy's people were going to walk from the place where she was buried to the place that she was killed. And it just so happens when we were doing the research in Belém, the capital city of Pará, they said, oh, good thing that you're coming on this date because we're going to be having a walk. It's going to be great. Wow. So, we just had to muster up the courage to get on this 16-hour journey, and we did it, Yeah.
It was hard for me because my family was very worried about me. This place in Pará, Anapu, she was murdered there in 2005, but she's not an isolated case. It's a place that people get shot and they get murdered over small things, over big things. Mm-hmm. So my family was like, don't go there. It's so dangerous. My mom didn't want me to go at all. My dad was a little bit like, oh, you're going with Vin. He's a good man. He's going to take care of you. But I was scared as being a girl. Once we got there, and the people really received us with open arms. Everyone, Vinny, there were 2 other nuns that were American, so they were very kind to us. Everybody was so nice to us, so it was worth the trip. But I was I was a little bit hesitant in the beginning to go.
So there was this level of fear because I was told that it was going to be something like the Old West. It's a lawless state. Sister Dorothy's murder was actually the only murder over a land dispute that there was a conviction. Right. Every other land dispute that someone has been killed, it's an unresolved case. So, that, can definitely put fear in you, but we prayed the rosary, and we had faith, and we felt like Sister Dorothy we felt the story found us.
Did you feel your life changed kind of in any way afterwards?
After we returned from the Amazon, we went to Brasilia, which is Christina's hometown, her city, and that's where I proposed to her.
Wow.
So in Parque da Cidade, the city park of Brasilia, there's a lake, and I got down on one knee and I asked her to marry me because I knew that this was something that this was the woman that I loved, that I wanted to spend my life with, and we have this story to tell that brings us so close together. Right. My heroes are filmmakers like Francis Ford Coppola, who he would take his family on all of his filmmaking endeavors. Right. Apocalypse Now, he shot that in the Philippines. He brought his whole family there, and they experienced typhoons and catastrophe after catastrophe. But his family was there, every leg of the journey. And now you look at Sofia Coppola, who is a wonderful filmmaker. Right. Now we have our first son, Vincent, and he's part of that journey. He's with us.
Right now he's just a PA though, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you proposed and you got the great answer, what were your plans after that? Because you're not back in New York. What were you planning to do, and what did you do?
So I actually returned back to New York, and then Christina returned that year to visit, and I was still going to NYU, and I was still taking my courses here, and we rented a small space on Lafayette Street, small little cubicle office space, and we just plugged away on the script. So the screenplay is basically telling the story of Sister Dorothy's life from the beginnings. It starts out when she's older and she's in the truck and she's going down this Amazon road and she's looking out and she's seeing this burnt landscape, and then it goes back to when she was a child. She remembers when she was a child and she's on her father's farm in Ohio, and her father is the one that instilled this love of the land and the love of the environment.
Have you guys worked in any films before? Have you made films before?
My first film that I did was called Nathan Hale. It's about the Battle of Brooklyn, and Nathan Hale's famous quote is, "My only regret is that I have but one life to lose for my country."
Right.
And what it was the British basically invaded Staten Island and Coney Island in Brooklyn, and they pushed George Washington and his troops into Manhattan, and basically George Washington asked for a person to go behind enemy lines and find out what the British were going to do. So Nathan Hale went across enemy lines and tried to find out what exactly General Howe was planning, and he was discovered. Right. And he was hung right here in Manhattan. I think it was somewhere on like 63rd Street. I don't know the exact location offhand.
Before working with Vin, he worked with me together in this documentary in Brazil. It was my final thesis, and it was about this guy called José da Mata
He has
outside.
a 35mm projector, and he basically takes this bus and travels around to the poor areas of Brazil and shows these movies.
All right, so you write the script together, and then tell us what you want to do it and how that's going.
Our ideal, what we want for this film in 2016 is going to be the Olympics in Rio de Janeiro. Right. So we really would love to piggyback on the movement of people seeing Brazil, in that spotlight, and then, say, what's going on in Brazil? Watching something like The Hope of the Amazon would sort of bring you inside the country and let you know.
It's a great country, but this happened, and this has happened. So it's important also to bring awareness, not so much like we want to expose the country or anything like that, but to bring awareness
to
internationally
inspire people.
for
Because
this
I
issue.
think that's what film really has the power to do.
We're going to wait for the third reel, which is going to be once the movie is made, and we can sit down again and talk about it. But I want to thank you both for coming, back to New York and talking to us. This is really great. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you. Okay.
Dorothy really loved the forest, and she would walk for hours. It's like walking around in God's arms. I don't know exactly how things are on the other side of this life, but I'm sure wherever she is, she's in the forest.
One of the things that makes me as a person work is the magnificence of the forest. And so how can we help bring an awareness of what's happening so that there's a chance for people to live and enjoy the beauties of this magnificent world that I've had the chance to live.